I was working the front desk at a hotel in Berlin when an American couple checked in around midnight. The man looked at me and asked if I could call them a taxi for 8 a.m. sharp. I said, sure, no problem. Then he pulled out a $20 bill and tried to hand it to me. I just stared at it. He waved it a little closer, like I didn't see it. For your trouble, he said. I told him we don't really do tipping here like that, and definitely not in dollars. He looked confused. His wife whispered something about Europe being weird. Then he asked if I could break the 20 into smaller bills so he could tip the cleaning staff. I had to explain. We use euros here. He seemed genuinely shocked, like he thought the whole world ran on American dollars. The next morning, they came down at 8:15 and asked where their taxi was. I reminded them they said 8 a.m. Yeah, but we're on vacation time, the man said. I just stood there trying to figure out what vacation time meant in real hours. Another time, I was working at a cafe in Amsterdam when a tourist asked for a coffee to go. Simple enough. I made it and handed it to her in a paper cup. She took one sip and her face twisted up. This tastes like actual coffee, she said. I told her it was actual coffee. She said she wanted coffee, but like normal coffee. I asked what normal meant. She described something that sounded more like a chocolate milkshake with a rumor of caffeine. When I suggested she might want a latte with extra sugar, she said no. She wanted regular American coffee. I explained that what Americans call regular coffee is basically coffee-flavored water to most of the world. She didn't believe me. She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of a Starbucks venti caramel whatever. I told her that wasn't coffee, that was a dessert pretending to be coffee. She left without paying because she said I was being rude about her drink. Preferences. My friend works at the train station in Paris. An American asked him which platform for the train to London. He pointed to the Eurostar terminal. The guy laughed and said, no, the train. My friend said yes, the train goes through a tunnel under the ocean. The American's face went blank. Under the ocean, he repeated. My friend nodded. The guy turned to his friend and said, they built a train tunnel under the whole ocean. My friend had to explain it's just under the English Channel, not the entire Atlantic. The guy still looked suspicious. He asked if the tunnel ever leaked. My friend assured him it was safe. The American asked how they got the fish to move out of the way when they built it. My friend realized this conversation could go on forever and just handed him a brochure. I used to work at a pharmacy in Sweden. One afternoon, an American tourist came in looking panicked. She needed medicine fast. I asked what was wrong. She said she had a terrible headache and needed some Tylenol. I showed her to the painkiller section. She picked up a box, looked at the price tag, and gasped. $18 for Tylenol? She said. I explained that medicine here costs what it costs because we don't really have the same pharmacy markup system. She couldn't understand why it was so expensive. I tried to explain that actually. Our healthcare system means most people don't pay much for serious medicine. Over-the-counter stuff isn't subsidized. She just kept repeating that back home it costs $3. I suggested she take fewer pills if price was the issue. She bought it, but mumbled the whole time about Swedish price gouging. Tour guide in Rome told me about an American family who got upset at the Colosseum. Not upset about the history or anything meaningful. Upset because there was no elevator. The dad kept asking different staff members where the accessible entrance was. They kept pointing to the ramps and stairs. He wanted an elevator to the top. The guide explained that the Colosseum is 2,000 years old and wasn't exactly built with modern accessibility codes. The dad said that was no excuse and they should install one. The guide asked where exactly they should put an elevator in an ancient monument. The dad suggested they could just drill through the side or something. The guide gave up and walked away. The family left a 1-star review online saying Rome doesn't care about tourists. I was bartending in Dublin when an American ordered an Irish car bomb. I refused. He got mad and said he'd been ordering them in Boston for years. I explained that's a pretty offensive name for a drink here, considering actual car bombs killed people during the Troubles. He said it was just a drink name and I was being too sensitive. I asked him how he'd feel if I went to New York and ordered a drink called a 9/11. He went quiet. Then he said that was different. I asked how. He couldn't really answer. He ended up ordering a Guinness and didn't tip, which was fine because We don't really expect tips anyway. My cousin works at a museum in Athens. She said an American couple spent 20 minutes arguing with her about the Parthenon. They insisted it was a Roman building. She explained multiple times that it's Greek, built in ancient Athens, centuries before Rome was powerful. The wife pulled out her phone and showed my cousin a website that listed it under Roman architecture. My cousin looked at the site. It was someone's personal blog. She tried to explain that the Parthenon is literally the most famous Greek building in existence. The husband said, "Well, Rome conquered Greece, so it became Roman." My cousin said that's not how historical attribution works. The wife asked if my cousin was really an expert. My cousin pointed to her name tag that said, Classical Archaeology PhD. They still didn't look. Convinced, a friend who works at a car rental place in Germany told me an American got angry about the car they rented. Not because anything was wrong with it, because it was too small. The guy had rented a compact car and was mad it was actually compact. He wanted something normal-sized. My friend showed him the available vehicles. He pointed at a van and said, that was more like it. My friend said, that's for large families or groups. The guy said he needed the space. My friend asked what for. The guy said, just in case. Just in case of what? My friend asked. The guy didn't have an answer but kept insisting the compact was too small for a regular person. He was traveling alone with one suitcase. My friend didn't upgrade him. I was working at a grocery store in Copenhagen, and a tourist asked where the peanut butter was. I showed her. She picked up a jar and made a face. Why is it so expensive? She asked. I told her peanut butter isn't really a thing here, so it's imported and costs more. She said that was ridiculous because everyone eats peanut butter. I explained that no, actually most of the world doesn't eat peanut butter regularly. She didn't believe me. She said it was a normal food. I told her it's mostly an American thing. She insisted I was wrong because she'd seen it in movies from other countries. I asked which movies. She couldn't name any. She bought it anyway and complained at the register about Danish grocery prices. My friend works at a clothing store in Milan, an American asked. If they had the shirt he was looking at in a medium. My friend said yes and grabbed one. The guy tried it on and said it was way too small. My friend checked the tag. It was a medium. The guy said it must be mislabeled. My friend explained that European sizing runs different from American sizing. The guy asked what size he'd be then. My friend said, probably an extra large. The guy got offended. He said he was a medium back home, and he wasn't going to buy a large just because European sizes were wrong. My friend tried to explain that sizes are arbitrary and just measurements, but the guy took it personally. He left without buying anything. My friend said it happens at least twice a week. I worked at a train ticket office in Switzerland. An American man came in and asked for a ticket to Zurich. I asked when. He said now. I told him the next train was in 45 minutes. He asked why so long. I said that's just when the next train leaves. He asked if there was an express option. I explained that all our trains are express in a way because they're fast and on time. He asked if he could pay extra to make one leave sooner. I told him that's not how trains work. He seemed frustrated. He asked how people get anywhere if they have to wait for trains. I reminded him that back home he probably has to wait for flights that are delayed for hours. He said that was different. I asked how. He said planes are complicated. I told him trains run on schedules. He bought the ticket but kept checking his watch like he could make time move faster. A guy I know works at a beach in Barcelona. He said an American woman got mad because there were topless sunbathers. She marched up to him and demanded he do something about it. He asked what exactly she wanted him to do. She said make them cover up because there were children around. He explained that topless sunbathing is normal here and legal. She said it was indecent. He pointed out that breasts aren't inherently sexual in this context and European culture doesn't sexualize bodies. The same way, she said that was just an excuse. He asked if she'd been to any other beaches in Europe. She said this was her first day. He suggested she might want to mentally adjust. She said she shouldn't have to adjust. They should respect American values. He reminded her she was in Spain. She huffed off, and I assumed found a different beach. I was working at a bookstore in London when a tourist asked if we had any books in English. I looked around at the entire store filled with English books. I said yes, all of them. She said no in American. I asked what she meant. She said normal English that Americans can read. I explained that British English and American English are the same language with minor spelling differences. She picked up a book and pointed at the word color. She said, "See, it's spelled wrong." I told her it's spelled correctly in British English. She said that's not how it's taught in school. I said yes, in American schools. She asked if British people could even understand American English. I said yes, we invented the language. She said that's not what her teacher told her. I didn't continue that conversation. My friend worked at a restaurant in Brussels. An American couple ordered mussels. When the food came, the woman looked horrified. She asked what it was. My friend said, "Mussels, what they ordered." She said she thought it was going to be different. My friend asked how. She said she didn't know they'd still look like shells. My friend explained that's what mussels are. The woman said back home they don't look like that. My friend asked what they look like back home. The woman couldn't describe it. Her husband tried one and liked it. She refused. She asked if they had chicken fingers. My friend said no. She asked, "What kind of restaurant doesn't have chicken fingers?" My friend said the kind that serves Belgian cuisine in Belgium. She ate bread and left hungry. I worked at a hostel in Prague. An American guy checked in and asked where the gym was. I told him we didn't have one. He asked how people stay in shape. I suggested he could go for a run outside. He said he didn't run outside. I asked why not. He said it wasn't safe. I asked what he thought would happen. He said, "You never know." I told him Prague is very safe. He said he'd heard Europe had a crime problem. I asked where he'd heard that. He said the news. I asked which news. He said just the news in general. I explained that Prague is statistically safer than most American cities. He didn't believe me. He stayed in his room most of the trip. A museum guard in Amsterdam told me in American, asked why all the signs were in Dutch. The guard said because we're in the Netherlands. The American said, "But how are tourists supposed to read them?" The guard pointed to the English translations under every sign. The American said, "Oh." Then he asked why the main text was in Dutch if they knew tourists were coming. The guard explained that Dutch people also visit museums and might want to read in their own language. The American said that made sense, but seemed inefficient. The guard asked what would be more efficient. The American suggested just using English for everything since most people speak it. The guard asked if American museums have all their signs in Spanish since many visitors speak Spanish. The American said, "That's different." The guard didn't ask how. I was working at a hotel in Vienna when an American asked what time the breakfast was. I said 6 to 10. He asked if that was AM or PM. I stared at him for a second. I said, "And because it's breakfast." He said, "You never know with Europe." I asked what that meant. He said everything's different here. I told him breakfast is still a morning meal everywhere on Earth. He said, "Well, what if someone wants breakfast at night?" I said, "Then they can order room service." He asked if breakfast food was available at night. I said eggs and toast exist at all hours, yes. He seemed satisfied. The next morning he came down at 10:15 and was upset breakfast was over. I reminded him, I said 10. He said he thought I meant 10:30. I asked why he would think that. He said he was just estimating. I didn't know how to respond to that. I worked at an airport information desk in Frankfurt. An American asked me which gate for his connecting flight. I checked his ticket and told him. He asked how far it was. I said about a 10-minute walk. He asked if there was a shuttle. I said no, it's just down that hall. He looked down the long corridor and said, "That's too far." I told him it's really not that far. He asked if he could get a wheelchair ride. I asked if he had mobility issues. He said no, but he didn't want to walk that much. I explained that wheelchair service is for people who actually need it. He said in America they give you rides if you ask. I said this isn't America. He asked if Europeans just walk everywhere. I said yes, generally. He called it primitive. I watched him slowly drag his rolling suitcase toward the gate like he was crossing a desert. My friend works at a chocolate shop in Switzerland. She said an American came in and bought a bar of Swiss chocolate. He took one bite and said it tasted weird. She asked what he meant. He said it didn't taste like chocolate. She asked what chocolate he was comparing it to. He said Hershey's. She explained that Swiss chocolate has different ratios of cocoa and milk and sugar. He said Hershey's was real chocolate. She told him that actually Hershey's has butyric acid in it, which is the same compound found in vomit, which is why too many non-Americans it tastes sour. He looked disgusted. He said that couldn't be true. She said he could look it up. He said American chocolate was fine, and this Swiss stuff was just fancy for no reason. He left the bar on the counter and walked out. I was working at a pharmacy in Oslo when a tourist needed to call an ambulance for his friend who'd twisted an ankle badly. I called for him. The ambulance came and took his friend. The next day, the tourist came back asking me about the bill. I said, "What bill?" He said, "For the ambulance." I told him there's no bill. He didn't believe me. He said ambulances cost money. I explained that in Norway, emergency services are covered. He said nothing's free. I said it's paid through taxes. He did some math in his head about Norwegian tax rates and said it still seemed like a scam. I asked if he'd rather pay $5,000 out of pocket for an ambulance like in America. He went quiet. Then he said, "At least that's honest." I didn't know what to say to that. A friend who works at a museum in Paris told me a tourist asked why everything was in French. The friend said, "Because it's a French museum in France." The tourist said it was inconvenient. My friend pointed to the English audio guides available for free. The tourist said she didn't want to use headphones. My friend suggested reading the English plaques next to each piece. The tourist said that was too much reading. My friend asked what she wanted. The tourist said everything should just be in English automatically. My friend said she was welcome to learn French if it bothered her that much. The tourist said she shouldn't have to learn a whole language just to visit a museum. My friend said then, use the audio guide. The tourist left in a huff. I worked at a rental bike place in Amsterdam. An American rented a bike and came back 20 minutes later saying it was broken. I checked it over. Everything worked fine. I asked what was wrong. He said the gears felt weird. I asked how. He said they didn't shift right. I tested it myself. Worked perfectly. I asked if he knew how to use bike gears. He said of course. I asked him to show me. He demonstrated and I realized he was doing it backwards. I showed him the correct way. He said that's not how it works in America. I told him bike gears are universal. He insisted American bikes were different. I showed him the instructions sticker on the handlebars with a diagram. He said the diagram must be wrong. I gave up and just let him ride it however he wanted. My cousin works at a grocery store in Ireland. She said an American asked where the ranch dressing was. She said they don't really carry it. He asked what people put on salad. She listed several dressings they had. He said those weren't normal. She asked what normal meant. He said ranch. She explained ranch isn't common outside America. He said that was impossible because everyone loves ranch. She said clearly not everyone. He insisted she was wrong. He said ranch is a basic condiment. She told him he could find it at specialty import stores for a high price. He said he wasn't paying extra for normal food. He left without buying salad. I worked at a train station in Belgium. An American asked why the announcement was in 3 languages. I said because we have 3 official languages. He asked why. I said because different regions speak different languages. He said that seemed complicated. I said it works fine. He asked how people communicate. I said most people speak multiple languages. He said that seemed hard. I asked if he spoke any other languages. He said no. I said maybe that's why it seemed hard. He said Americans don't need other languages because everyone speaks English. I pointed out that he was currently in a country where not everyone speaks English. He said, yeah, but most people do. I said that doesn't make it less useful to know other languages. He shrugged and said it seemed like extra work. I was working at a hotel in Edinburgh when an American family checked out. The dad asked if we took American Express. I said yes. He handed me the card. I processed it. He asked why the charge was different from what he calculated. I explained foreign transaction fees. He said his bank told him there were no fees. I said the fee isn't from us, it's from his bank. He called his bank on speakerphone. The representative confirmed there was a 3% foreign transaction fee. He argued with them for 5 minutes. The rep explained it was in the terms he agreed to. He said he didn't read those. The rep said that's not their problem. He hung up and asked if I could charge him in dollars instead. I said no, we charge in pounds. He asked why not. I said because we're in Scotland.